The door swung open, and my heart stopped. There, in the flickering glow of the TV, stood my nephew, all of 13, his eyes wide as saucers, frozen in the doorway of my Brooklyn apartment. I was mid-kiss with Ryan, my lips still tingling from the warmth of his, when the world screeched to a halt. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Not with Ethan, my sister's kid, who looked up to me like I was some kind of superhero. Not in this cramped, third-floor walk-up where Ryan and I had carved out our fragile sanctuary. A place where we could be us two guys in love. No apologies. No masks. But there Ethan was, his backpack slung over one shoulder, staring at us like he'd just walked into a parallel universe. Ryan pulled back first, his hand slipping from mine, his hazel eyes darting between me and Ethan. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, the old, familiar panic clawing up my throat. I'd spent years hiding this part of myself, first from my family, then from the world. Growing up in a small Ohio town, I'd learned early that being gay wasn't something you shouted from the rooftops. My parents, God rest them, never knew. My sister, Claire, suspected but never asked. And now, here was Ethan, witnessing the truth I'd kept locked away. Ethan. My voice cracked. Useless. I expected him to bolt, to look at me with disgust, to carry this moment back to Claire and unravel everything. But he didn't. He just stood there, his sneakers squeaking against the hardwood, his face unreadable. Uncle Jake. His voice was small, not accusing, just curious. Are you with him? Ryan shifted beside me, his knee brushing mine, a silent reminder that we were in this together. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. This was the moment I dreaded since I first realized I loved men, not women. Back when I was younger than Ethan. The moment someone I cared about would see me, really see me, and decide I was less than. Yeah, Ethan, I said, forcing the words out. This is Ryan. He's my boyfriend. The word felt foreign, like it didn't belong in my mouth. I braced for the fallout, for the judgment I'd been conditioned to expect. But Ethan just tilted his head, his dark curls falling into his eyes, and said, "Cool. Mom didn't tell me you had a boyfriend." Cool. One word, and it knocked the air out of me. Ryan let out a nervous laugh, and I realized I was holding my breath. This wasn't how I'd pictured it. Not even close. That night, after Ethan crashed on the couch with his Nintendo Switch, Ryan and I sat in the kitchen, whispering over mugs of coffee. The city hummed outside, a distant siren cutting through the quiet. I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's face, not horrified, not ashamed, just accepting. He's a good kid, Ryan said, his voice low, his fingers tracing the rim of his mug. You raised him right, even if you don't think you did. I didn't raise him, I muttered. Claire did. I just show up sometimes. Take him to ball games. Buy him pizza. Ryan reached across the table, his hand covering mine. You're more than that to him, Jake. You're the guy he trusts enough to barge in on unannounced. I snorted, but the weight in my chest didn't lift. Ethan's dad had walked out when he was 5, leaving Claire to juggle single motherhood and a nursing job. I'd stepped in where I could, weekend visits, school pickups, the occasional heart-to-heart when Claire was too exhausted to handle Ethan's questions about why his dad wasn't around. But I'd always kept my personal life at arm's length, especially this part. Until tonight. What if he tells Claire? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She's my sister. But she's got her own ideas about things. About me. Ryan's eyes softened. Then you deal with it. Together. You don't have to hide anymore. Jake. Not from him. Not from her. I wanted to believe him. Ryan had this way of making the world seem simpler. Like love could just be love. No strings attached. He'd grown up in a liberal bubble in Seattle, where being out was as normal as breathing. Me. I carried the weight of a childhood spent dodging whispers and sideways glances. Of a father who'd once said, "No son of mine will ever be that way." Even now, at 32, those words clung to me like damp clothes. The next morning, Ethan was up before us, raiding my fridge for orange juice. He acted like nothing had happened, chattering about his new video game while Ryan flipped pancakes. I watched them, my nephew and my boyfriend, joking about whether syrup or whipped cream was the superior topping. And something inside me cracked open. Not broke, just opened. Like a window letting in air I hadn't realized I needed. "Uncle Jake, can Ryan come to the arcade with us today?" Ethan asked, his mouth full of pancake. "He says he's unbeatable at claw machines." Ryan grinned, tossing a dish towel over his shoulder. "I am a claw machine god. Kid. You'll see." I laughed, the sound surprising me. "Yeah, he can come. But don't cry when he wipes the floor with you." For a moment, it felt normal. Like we were a family, not a secret waiting to implode. But in the back of my mind, I knew this was just the beginning. Ethan might be okay with it. But Claire was another story. And beyond her, there was the rest of the world, me co-workers at the ad agency. My old high school buddies. The neighbors who still asked when I was settling down with a nice girl. Ryan and I had built something real. But it was fragile. And I wasn't sure I was ready to test its strength. As we headed out to the arcade, Ethan bouncing ahead of us, I caught Ryan's eye. He gave me that look, the one that said, "We've got this." And for the first time in years, I almost believed it. The arcade was a cacophony of flashing lights and electronic beeps. The kind of place that made you forget the world outside. Ethan darted between machines, his energy boundless, while Ryan and I trailed behind, sharing a basket of greasy fries. Every so often, Ethan would glance back, like he was checking we were still there. Still real. "Think he's okay?" I asked Ryan, keeping my voice low. A kid nearby was screaming about a broken skee-ball machine, giving us cover. Ryan shrugged, popping a fry into his mouth. "He's 13. He's probably more freaked out about walking in on you kissing than who you were kissing." I winced. The memory of Ethan's wide-eyed stare still burned. I just don't want him to think less of me. Or us. Ryan's hand brushed mine under the table. Quick and subtle. He doesn't. Look at him's already scheming to beat me at air hockey. Sure enough, Ethan was waving us over, a grin splitting his face. "Come on, Ryan. You're going down." We played for hours, the three of us laughing, trash-talking, and racking up tickets. Ryan was terrible at air hockey, despite his boasts, and Ethan crowed every time he scored. Watching them, I felt a warmth I hadn't known I was missing. This was what I'd wanted, a life where I didn't have to hide, where love didn't come with a side of fear. But the fear wasn't gone. It lingered, sharp and familiar, as we left the arcade and headed back to my apartment. Ethan was spending the weekend, which meant Claire would pick him up Sunday night. I hadn't told her about Ryan. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I didn't trust myself to handle her reaction. Growing up, Claire had been my protector, the one who'd sneak me snacks when Dad grounded me, who'd cover for me when I missed curfew. But she'd also inherited some of our parents' old-school values, the kind that made words like gay feel like an accusation. Back at the apartment, Ethan sprawled on the couch, counting his arcade tickets like they were gold. Ryan was in the kitchen, making hot chocolate, and I sat across from Ethan, trying to find the words. "Hey, bud," I started, my throat tight. "About last night." He looked up, his expression open but guarded. "Yeah. I didn't mean for you to find out like that. About me and Ryan." Ethan shrugged, his eyes on his tickets. "It's fine. Uncle Jake. I mean, it was weird at first, but it's not a big deal. Mom says love is love. You know." I blinked. "She said that?" "Yeah. When we watched that movie with the two guys getting married. She said it doesn't matter who you love, as long as you're happy." I felt like I'd been punched, but in a good way, if that made sense. All this time, I'd been so sure Claire would judge me, that she'd see me as the brother who'd let her down. But maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe I'd been the one judging her. Ryan walked in, balancing 3 mugs of hot chocolate. "What's with the serious faces? Did I miss something?" Ethan grinned, taking a mug. "Just Uncle Jake being all emo." I laughed, the tension easing. "Watch it, kid. I'm still cooler than you." As we sipped our drinks, the city lights twinkling outside, I realized something. This moment messy, imperfect, real was what I'd been running from my whole life. Not the shame, not the judgment, but the vulnerability of being seen. And now that it was here, it didn't feel like the end of the world. It felt like a beginning. Sunday morning brought a knot of dread to my stomach. Claire was coming to pick up Ethan, and I still hadn't figured out how to tell her about Ryan. I'd spent years dodging her questions about my love life, deflecting with jokes or changing the subject. But now, with Ethan in the know, the truth felt like a ticking bomb. Ryan sensed my unease. He was chopping vegetables for lunch, his movement steady, while I paced the kitchen. "You're gonna wear a hole in the floor, Jake," he said, not looking up. "I can't just drop this on her," I said, running a hand through my hair. "What if she freaks out? What if she doesn't want Ethan around us anymore?" Ryan set down his knife, his eyes meeting mine. "You're spiraling. Claire loves you. She's not going to disown you because you're in love. You don't know her like I do." I shot back, but there was no heat in it. Ryan was right, I was spiraling. But the fear was real, rooted in a lifetime of hiding. Ethan bounded into the kitchen, oblivious to the tension. "Can we order pizza tonight? Mom says she's working late, so I can stay longer." I froze. She's working late. When was she going to tell me? Ethan shrugged, grabbing a carrot stick from Ryan's cutting board. "She texted me this morning. Said she'd be here around 8. 8. That gave me a few more hours to figure out how to have the conversation I'd been avoiding for years. Ryan caught my eye, giving me a small nod, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. The day passed in a blur. We took Ethan to the park, where he and Ryan played a chaotic game of frisbee while I sat on a bench, my mind racing. I watched them, laughing and tumbling in the grass, and I wondered what it would be like to live like this, all the Timino secrets. No fear. Just us. Together. Out in the open. By the time Claire arrived, I was a wreck. She knocked on the door, Her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from a long shift. Her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. Ethan ran to hug her, babbling about the arcade and Ryan's terrible air hockey skills. I stood back, my heart pounding, as Ryan stepped forward to introduce himself. "Hi, I'm Ryan," he said, extending a hand. "Jake's boyfriend." The words hung in the air, and I braced myself. Claire's eyes widened slightly, flicking from Ryan to me. For a moment, no one spoke. Then she took Ryan's hand, a small smile breaking through her tired expression. "Nice to meet you, Ryan," she said. "Jake's been hiding you." "Huh?" Ethan giggled, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. No anger, no judgment, just Claire. Being Claire. I should have known better than to underestimate her. We sat down for coffee. The four of us crammed around my tiny kitchen table. Claire asked Ryan about his job. Was a graphic designer. Freelance. With a knack for making even the most boring logos look alive. Ethan chimed in with stories from the weekend. And I sat there, half listening, half marveling at how easy it felt. Like this was how it was supposed to be. Later, after Ethan and Claire left, Ryan pulled me into a hug. "Told you," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "You're not alone in this." I held him tighter, letting the truth of his words sink in. But even as I did, I knew the world outside my apartment wasn't as forgiving as my sister and nephew. There were still battles to fight, people who wouldn't understand, and I wasn't sure I was ready for them. The weeks that followed felt like stepping into a new skin. Claire's acceptance, Ethan's nonchalance changed things. I started inviting Ryan over more often, letting him leave his toothbrush in my bathroom, his favorite coffee in my pantry. Small things, but they felt huge, like I was claiming a life I'd never thought I could have. At work, though, I was still in the closet. The ad agency was a pressure cooker, full of sharp-witted creatives who thrived on gossip. I'd overheard enough casual homophobia in the break room to know coming out wouldn't be easy. My boss, Greg, was old school, the kind of guy who thought diversity was a buzzword for HR. I kept my head down, focusing on campaigns, letting my personal life stay a mystery. But Ryan was pushing me, gently but persistently. "You don't have to tell everyone," he'd say, "but you don't have to hide either. You're allowed to exist, Jake." One night, over takeout in my apartment, he brought it up again. Ethan was there, playing a video game in the living room, his laughter filtering through the walls. Ryan leaned across the table, his eyes serious. "What if we went to your office holiday party together?" he asked. "As a couple." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "Ryan, that's a lot. Those people, they don't even know I'm gay." "Exactly," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You've been there 5 years. Jake, don't you think it's time they knew who you are?" I wanted to argue, to list all the reasons it was a bad idea. But then Ethan wandered in, grabbing a slice of pizza, and said, "You should do it, Uncle Jake. It'd be awesome. Like, you and Ryan could dance and stuff." I choked on my water, and Ryan laughed, ruffling Ethan's hair. "See, the kid gets it." The idea stuck with me, gnawing at the edges of my fear. The holiday party was a month away, a glitzy affair at a Manhattan hotel. I'd always gone alone, making excuses about why I didn't bring a date. This time, Ryan wanted to be my +1, and the thought both thrilled and terrified me. Over the next few days, I wrestled with it. I imagined the looks, the whispers, the way Greg might raise an eyebrow or worse. But I also imagined walking into that room with Ryan's hand in mine, no longer pretending to be someone I wasn't. The thought was intoxicating, like a drug I hadn't known I needed. I started small. I told my coworker Maya, the one person at the agency I trusted. We were grabbing coffee during a lunch break, and I blurted it out. I'm gay, and I've got a boyfriend. Maya grinned, like it was the most normal thing in the world. About time you told me, Jake. So, when do I meet this guy? Her reaction gave me courage, but it didn't erase the fear. The world wasn't all Maya's or Claire's or Ethan's. There were still people out there who'd look at me and Ryan and see something wrong, something to be fixed. And as the holiday party loomed, I realized I was about to find out who those people were. The night of the holiday party arrived like a storm I couldn't outrun. Ryan looked sharp in a tailored blazer, his confidence a stark contrast to the knot in my stomach. We stood outside the hotel, the city's pulse thrumming around us, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. You ready? Ryan asked, his hand finding mine. No, I admitted, but I squeezed his hand anyway. Let's do this. The ballroom was a sea of sequins and suits, the air thick with perfume and ambition. I spotted Maya first, waving us over with a grin. She hugged Ryan like they were old friends. And for a moment, I relaxed. But then Greg approached, his smile tight, his eyes lingering on our joined hands. Jake, he said, his tone clipped. Didn't know you were bringing someone. This is Ryan, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My boyfriend. Greg's eyebrow twitched, but he shook Ryan's hand. Nice to meet you, he said, though it sounded like a formality. He excused himself quickly, and I felt the weight of his judgment settle over me. The rest of the night was a blur. Some co-workers were great Maya, and a few others toasted to us, their warmth genuine. But others whispered, their glances sharp enough to cut. By the time we left, I was exhausted, torn between relief and dread. Back at my apartment, Ryan pulled me close. You did it, he said, his voice soft. You showed up as you. Yeah, I said, but the victory felt hollow. Greg's reaction, the whispers, they reminded me the world wasn't as simple as Ryan wanted it to be. And yet, standing there with him, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe it wasn't about changing the world. Maybe it was about changing mine. The next day, Ethan called, his voice bright. Mom says you and Ryan were awesome at the party. She saw pics on Maya's Instagram. I laughed, the sound surprising me. Claire had known, and she hadn't cared. Ethan didn't care. And Rian, he was still here, still fighting for us. For the first time, I started to believe I could fight, too. Work became a minefield after the party. Greg's attitude shifted, subtle, but noticeable. He passed me over for a big campaign, citing fit with the client. I knew what he meant. I'd seen it before, in the way my dad used to change the subject when certain topics came up. It wasn't overt hate, but it was enough to sting. Maya noticed, too. He's being a jerk, she said one day over lunch. You're the best creative we've got. Don't let him make you feel small. Her words helped, but the doubt crept in. I started second-guessing myself, wondering if coming out had been a mistake. Ryan, as always, was my anchor. He'd listen to my rants, then pull me into a hug, reminding me I was more than my job. One evening, Ethan showed up unexpectedly, his backpack stuffed with homework. Claire was working a double shift, and he'd taken the subway alone. Mom said it was okay. He insisted, though I made a mental note to call her later. We ordered pizza, and Ethan talked about school, about a kid in his class who'd come out as non-binary. Some kids were mean, he said, his voice quiet. But I told them to shut up. It's not cool to bully someone for who they are. I stared at him, my pizza forgotten. You did that? Yeah, he said, like it was no big deal. You and Rhiannury happy. That's what matters. Right. I nodded, my throat tight. Ethan was 13, but he was teaching me something I'd spent years unlearning, that love didn't need to be justified. It just was. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Greg or anyone else define me. I started looking for new opportunities. Freelance gigs that would let me be myself without apology. Ryan helped, sending me listings, even designing a portfolio site for me. Slowly, I started to see a future where I didn't have to hide. Months passed, and life settled into a new rhythm. I landed a freelance gig with a startup that valued my work and didn't care who I loved. Ryan moved in, his art supplies cluttering my apartment, his laughter filling the spaces I'd kept empty for too long. Ethan became a regular fixture, spending weekends with us, teaching Ryan how to play his favorite video games. But the world wasn't done testing us. One night, Claire called, her voice shaky. A coworker had made a snide comment about me and Ryan. Something about keeping Ethan away from that lifestyle. She'd shut it down, but it rattled her, and it rattled me. We're okay, she said, but I could hear the worry in her voice. I hate that people are like this. So do I said, my jaw tight. But I'm not hiding anymore. Not for them. Ryan and I talked it over, deciding to be more visible, not less. We started going to local pride events, holding hands in public, living like we had nothing to prove. It wasn't always easy. There were stares, comments, moments that made my skin crawl. But there were also moments of joy, like when Ethan marched with us at Pride, waving a rainbow flag bigger than he was. I started writing about it, too. Not for work, but for myself, a blog about being out, about finding family in unexpected places. It was raw, messy, real. People read it. Strangers reached out, sharing their own stories. I realized I wasn't just telling my story, I was helping others tell theirs. A year after Ethan walked in on us, I stood in my apartment, now our apartment, watching Ryan hang a new painting on the wall. It was Usham, me, Ethan, Claire laughing together at the park, captured in bold, vibrant strokes. Ethan had helped him sketch it, his clumsy lines adding a charm that made my heart ache. Claire and Ethan were coming over for dinner, a tradition we'd started. As I set the table, I thought about how far we'd come. The shame I'd expected that night, the shame I'd carried for years, had never come. Instead, I'd found something better, acceptance, not just from others, but from myself. When Ethan burst through the door, Claire behind him, he ran straight to Ryan, showing off a new game. Claire hugged me, her eyes bright. You're happy, she said simply. That's all I ever wanted. We ate, laughed, argued over board games. Later, as Ryan and Ethan battled it out over Monopoly, I stepped onto the balcony, the city sprawling below. I thought about the boy I'd been, the one who'd hidden in shadows, afraid of his own heart. That boy was still part of me, But he wasn't all of me. Not anymore. Ryan joined me, his arms slipping around my waist. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I'm more than okay. The shame I'd expected had never come. Instead, I'd found love, family, a life I could claim without fear. And as the city lights twinkled below, I knew I'd keep fighting for it, not just for me, but for Ethan, for Ryan, for everyone who deserved to love without apology.